reason that we have come to this wonderful part of Wales on this beautiful day is to try out the techniques of handling the boats that have been specially built by Eurocraft for the expedition Kota 5. Now, many of us on this trip have in fact done whitewater rafting before and have quite a lot of experience. But there are some who are newcomers, and indeed for everyone on it. You can't be too old to learn new tricks.
Since 1998, the Scientific Exploration Society has been exploring the rivers of Bolivia with traditional reed boats that Thor Heyerdahl believed ancient people had used to carry trade goods to the sea. But in 2004, we tackled a new river, the Rio Grande in southern Bolivia. Beginning up at El Hajal, this great river runs through a series of gorges over a great many cataracts. It starts at about 1,600 meters above sea level and descends in a distance of some 400 kilometers to an altitude of about 1,200 meters. There are numerous rapids, plagues of insects, and even sandstorms blown up from the fine sand along the riverbanks. This is where landslides have brought great boulders down into the riverbed, almost creating a blockage. And we knew that if we were going to go through this, we were going to have to portage some of the way. No scientific exploration had ever been carried out in these gorges, and our aim was to carry out an archaeological, geological, hydrographic and zoological task whilst navigating this river if we could. And also, of course, helping the local people with community aid to encourage them to help us. And indeed, the results of the expedition overall, we believed, would help them.
Hello, I'm Roger Bodley. I won't tell you exactly, let's say mid-50s. And I'm a doctor. I've long been interested in South America and exploration. My first impression on the group dynamics so far is that we're a very motley group. And it's very interesting how it doesn't take very much to get a group to gel, and the sort of things that we've been doing this morning, getting absolutely frozen but relying on each other so that we didn't fall in, or rescuing each other, you suddenly find that cuts away an awful lot of the very sort of long-winded getting to know people things that happen in other types of groups. And I think we'll find that this evening it's going to be a fairly tight-knit group. They've been through quite a lot of pain this morning already, and there's nothing like shared pain to get people talking together and breaking down the barriers.
My name is Ben Cartwright, I'm 58. I'm an aircraft engineer, but I'm on the trip to work as chief engineer, maintaining the engines, boats and any ancillary equipment that we take with us. The background to it is that I have been a member of SES for many, many years, 30 years on different expeditions throughout the world, mainly doing the similar kind of work, so wide experience of outboard motors and boats.
We made our base at the friendly little town of Rio Grande. And here we were to start with some community work, particularly at the local hospital. And at this hospital there's an interesting feature, which is the laundry. For it was here that the body of Che Guevara was brought after the Bolivian army had killed him in a battle near the river. And of course it's still remembered today and has become something of a tourist attraction. And we were fortunate to have the use of the Baptist Mission's light aircraft to carry out an air reconnaissance of the river. And looking down at this great gash, which is caused by the Rio Grande cutting through the Andean foothills, we could see the terrain which we were going to have to battle across. Colonel Hugo Cornejo of the Bolivian Army had already been down here on a reconnaissance for us, and he reported the temperatures of around 4 to 38 degrees centigrade. But this was to be the happy hunting ground for our Bolivian geologists.
The first thing we did was to set up our base at the house of Lalo, who is a local businessman who is very keen on paleontology and archaeology, and he's already trying to assemble a glyptodont. Now, if you're not sure what a glyptodont is, it's a giant tortoise or a giant armadillo. probably died about 5 million years ago. And he's been extremely interested in the work of Kota Mama, and we are helping his little group to assemble various artifacts for a small museum here, which they hope will attract ecotourism, and it's all part of the ongoing process of trying to raise the level of the economy of this area.
In my previous expeditions, we've been to schools all over the place, and it is amazing when you go home and tell the children at home that pigs and chickens walk in and out of the classroom whilst the children are doing their lessons. I've only been to meet the principal to arrange today's visit, and I think, if I understood, my Spanish is rather limited, but if I understood correctly, I think the children might dance or sing or something of that sort. You're never quite sure until you get there, but we'll put all our gifts up.
Four of those, that's 80 litres. We can't get through a meal.
The most up-to-date geological map we have of the area, and we're trying to decide what the volcanic hills, which the group found the day before yesterday, how they fit into this geological map. And it seems to be a peculiar anomaly that there's no explanation for if they are volcanic hills, but the answer is more likely that they aren't volcanic, and it's due to a very high pigmentation staining the rocks there, giving a very different colour to the rocks.
This is where the two water sources come together.
Right.
There's one up there, which we won't see, and then this is the pipe that comes in from where we were, except this pipe comes down the hill and back up. Rio Grande is 18 kilometres in that direction, and the water source for the water supply is 3 kilometres in that direction. Regrettably, this section of pipe was put in 35 years ago. It was a steel pipe, and it's now leaking very badly. The result is that Rio Grande is not getting enough water, and at the moment water rationing is imposed. So Just a Drop charity has come in with $10,000 to replace 2.5 kilometres of pipeline, and that will ensure that Rio Grande gets enough water and rationing doesn't have to be imposed. The cost of the pipeline is $10,000, and for supplying 8,500 people, that works out at just over $1 a head. I think that's tremendous value to give the people of Rio Grande a safe, clean and potable water supply.
Wow.
Esta chovenita propia del lugar, esta chovenita propia del lugar. Hoy que me recuerda de antaño lo mejor, y con su bandita de alegría sin dudar, se complementa siempre con el camino de fiesta. Me gusta la fiesta de Morón y su sabor, porque me recuerda de antaño lo mejor, y con su bandita prefiero el silencio. Si tú pies mis manos no tendrán razón de amar y de ser, mis caricias se apagarán si amarte no puedo.
Okay, finally we're leaving Valle Grande. It's been a town that's been very good to us. The people here have been magnificent, they've supported us, they've given us every single thing that we need. We've done all the testing of the boats, we've got the motors on, we don't know whether they work, we haven't started them yet. But this is it, this is crunch point. We're heading up country today to a town which I think is called Quirago, and that's not too far away from our launch point. We're going to be staying there tonight on the floor of a schoolhouse, just dossing down, and tomorrow night the local villagers are putting on a launch party for us. You can see behind me that the bus is getting loaded up. The majority of us are going to be in there. We've got a 5-ton truck with all the gear and the engines, water, meths, all the food supplies, personal kit, etc. Just goes on and on and on. It's a big operation. The logistics have been quite enormous. The management of them have been amazing, and things so far are running incredibly smoothly. So
¿Están gastando en el camino?
No.
Well, we're here, we're finally almost at the start of the river, and it appears the locals have run out of dynamite to make their road, so we're trying to find another way through. Apparently it was quite an interesting road on the way up, but I wouldn't know because I was asleep pretty much all the way here. I have a habit of doing that. But, you know, hopefully we'll get a bit of carrying in and we'll be able to start doing some rafting.
There's no turning points for any vehicles. We couldn't certainly get the big trucks down, we might get the small ones down, but then they have to reverse all the way up. And then we still have a carry, even with the locals helping, of at least several hundred meters down to a site. And then we'd have to go across the bridge. Yeah.
Muy bien, gracias. Gracias por haber venido.
Buenos días.
Concejal. Buenos días, ¿cómo están? Yo no sé para acá. Buenas. Hola, hola, buenas tardes.
Ustedes qué están haciendo, y principalmente el dirigente, la autoridad máxima de esta comunidad, que es Águila Orco, va a darles la primera palabra como bienvenida oficial a ustedes. Eso es.
And they are very happy that the Kota expedition is here, and the main authorities are here, and they want to give us a very good reception and welcome.
We are particularly grateful to you all, and especially to Senor Orlando, for coming all the way into Quiroga last night to help us.
Nosotros especialmente estamos agradecidos a don Orlando.
These are for the clinic.
Esto es para la posta sanitaria, para la posta de salud. Es una ayuda pequeña, pero creo que la van a poder utilizar bien. Un tensiómetro, los termos para poner las vacunas. Tenemos acá también unos espéculos y otros
You're getting no water up your telltale.
Today's been our first day on the river. It's been very interesting. I've been building up to it for a few days now, and it was good to finally get out and do something on the river. Crews work well together. A couple of problems on the, like as in going over the rapids, inexperience, but hopefully that will level out over the next few days.
Right, we've come down the river today. We've seen a number of tracks and spoken with local hunters about what animals are around. Yeah, there's normal domestic animals, but from the dangerous point of view, there are a few snakes, rattlesnake and coral snake. There are a few dangerous spiders which we haven't identified. And from the animal point of view, there's puma, big cats, sharp teeth, sharp claws. Probably will stay away from us, but hopefully it will. And the most dangerous one, apparently it's the most feared animal in South America, is the white-lipped peccary, which is basically a small pig, stands about half a metre high and weighs about 30 kilos, and apparently they're vicious. And they go around in packs of up to 100 and can apparently flatten a camp.
Push this 40 litres of water through the process as fast as we can, draining it back into these tanks, and then we'll start to put purification tablets in. From the moment we arrive and start pouring water like this, probably going to take 32, 33 minutes before we've got the first drinkable water, and that's going flat out. We're going to try and improve on it, but we can produce, at an estimate, a litre a minute. So for 20 people, 6 litres a day, 120 litres, 2 hours absolute minimum just to produce bare drinking water, plus the half-hour startup time. It's going to take us really 3 hours to start with to get water for the day.
Each household sometimes had a smaller one that they used to grind up. They have a stone similar to this, and you see them doing it today. So these are everywhere. A lot of these big ones are probably still in situ, so this is the point of the exercise today, is we're going to mark where each one of these are, yeah, and then the surveyors are going to plot them in across the site.
Well, I'm on top by the Inca settlement, or what we think actually might be a pre-Inca settlement at the moment. Baking hot. It's been a blistering day, and there's a few of the guys out there with Jules at the moment doing a bit of a dig and actually taking away the surface material to see what's underneath. They just measured out a fairly standard square in archaeological terms, and they're chipping away at that. We've uncovered some really, really interesting stuff. Stone axe heads, pottery, fragments, very visible parts, the bases of large pots, handles, and as I say, some stone implements as well. So it's been very good. It's a tough environment up here.
We're now at Pontoasi, where we're having our first resupply. About every 10 days or so, Simon Hampel, who was commanding our reconnaissance and support group, had to bring in food and take out, of course, the scientific specimens that we've been carrying, otherwise the boats would become overloaded. And we always sent the reconnaissance canoe, which is called Fearnought, up ahead to give us early warning of the problems. And going down the river, as you see, we were running at very low water. And the reason for that is this river, I believe, would be suicidal if you went down at high water with these enormous rocks, with the water piling over them, piling around them, you'd be smashed to pieces. And so we were going through when it was very shallow. And this, of course, was to create a certain number of problems. Now, the boats were designed that they could either be used as a white watercraft and paddled, or they could take an engine. And EP Barras had very kindly supplied us with 15 horsepower Mariner outboards, which could be mounted inside the boats. The boats, which were sponsored by JP Knight, were specially designed by Eurocraft, and this was the first expedition on which they'd been used. So there was your fleet of 4 craft going down the river, and the canoe, fear not, about up to a kilometre ahead, giving us warning of the problems. Occasionally we would get stuck on rocks, and that meant somebody usually had to jump out and push us off. We couldn't use the engines as often as we would have wished because the water was often too shallow.
All right, John, so what we've got here is I've identified on here 8 points that either René or the locals have told us about, which are of archaeological interest, between Valle Grande, Santa Rosa, and a junction, not a junction we're going to go into, on the Rio Grande. So that's an area Pucara is just here.
Can more or less stop wherever we go and set up a little table. And I mean, you've only got to see the delight on their faces. It really does bring it home. This makes a tremendous difference to their lives. One lady yesterday, she simply walked up the road. She hobbled along with a stick, and she seemed to be in considerable pain. She picked up the first pair of glasses, and her smile said it all. So, thank you everybody who's left them on my doorstep at home.
Ese negrito, ¿cómo está?
And we were back again on the river. But of course I must mention that the reconnaissance and support group had a great deal else to do besides supplying us. For instance, they had to get on with the schools, the clinic, the hospital, and giving out of spectacles. This was all made possible thanks largely to the Patino Foundation, who backed the expedition. And so whilst we were going down the river, you might say enjoying ourselves, the RSG were hard at work up in the highlands and bringing in all the supplies we needed. And then we came to an amazing feature. We came to this incredibly narrow gorge, or canyon. This was Hartman's Canyon, only 40 feet wide.
We sent a recce team out just a moment ago to check this gorge out to see if there was any obstacles for the inflatable boats to come down. And the recce patrol reported back that they found the bridge. So we've just come over to have a look at this bridge. As you can see, it's quite impressive in structure. We've got timber lintels at the base here that jut out and then come up at a directly horizontal to more timber lintels, which would have then protruded across the gorge, making up the main part of the bridge. This part here they've had to extend out in order for the bridge to work. Now here they've used very large or reasonably sized blocks, but they're also using cement, which is something the Incas didn't do. Incas never generally, as a rule, built anything with cement, so this leads me to believe that this could quite possibly be colonial. Now for what reason, who knows. There is a road that's made up on the opposite sides of the bank going off to the right. This could have been strategic for the colonials, or possibly this bridge could be later.
The depth of water in Hartman's Canyon was such that it was quite possible to have a bit of fun, and some of the young bloods enjoyed jumping in from the cliff tops. Once again the river became a little more severe, and occasionally we were caught on rocks or wrapped around them, and then other boats had to get lines from the shore and help to pull the stricken boat off the rocks. This could take, indeed it did once, up to an hour and a half to get a boat off. Quite a hair-raising business, and the water wasn't that warm. The rapids were, generally speaking, not more than about grade 4 on the international scale, but even that can be quite something. This was where the training in Wales really paid off. The helmsmen knew their stuff and the crew had been working together for some time, and so we found it reasonably easy to manage these great boats. Of course, they were quite heavily laden because they're carrying all the scientific equipment as well as our food and our tents and everything else.
How do you feel that went?
Not too good, thank you, but we just got stuck. But it was just a problem. We got it in the end.
It's nearly 11:30, 3 hours after we were supposed to leave. And the good news is we've got, I think, nearly 20 ponies and mules. The only things they can't find room for at the moment are the whiskey and the loom rolls. Fingers crossed they're going in now. So I reckon we'll be off in about 10 minutes. We understand from the advance party we sent down, led by Toby, that it's quite rough going. We're going over a riverbed with a lot of rocks. Probably about a 5-hour walk from here to the river. So we'll try and get there before dark and fingers crossed meet John when he's coming down to join us.
Next day, our flotilla pressed on into a much narrower canyon and a test of men and muscle.
Right. An awful lot of water coming down onto the boat. It's too heavy for us just to pull straight off. So what we've created here is what we call a Z-pull, which gives us 3 times the amount of force we would normally have through a selection of carabiners and pulleys to pull it off.
Stop! Roger, we didn't think it's moving at all. I think we do need to move Oscar's line to the other end of the boat over and we can set up another Z-pull.
We've been on there, I'm guessing, for the best part of an hour, and I'm just trying to warm up. The other guys, some of them are sorting the boat. All the land crew gave us a massive assistance. It took a concerted effort from everybody to unwrap that, but I think it was a good lesson learned. Lots of throw bag practice and lots of shivering. I think we've got all our kit, some of it drifted off, but we had guys downstream who were acting as pickups.
We're in Lago Pampa and we're just about to go on a long hike up a mountain to find some Inca caves, and in the meantime we're just going to help a couple of the local villagers out by removing their rotten teeth. We've got this nice setup here, the right height, comfortable. Open? Which one? Oh! Let me have a look at that. Smile. Oh, sorry. I can't. I've got a clean glove, so just one finger there. Just smile in the camera. Have a look at the teeth. They're pretty bad. Okay. What about these here? They're no good to you, and they're just rotten. Pepe, come and have a word with this gentleman in Spanish and tell him that I'm only here for today, and he'll never get a chance like this again to have his teeth
Todito está
sorted
roto,
out.
hay que sacar todito eso.
We've been staying in Lago Pampa, and this is about an hour and a half's walk from there. we've had to climb up hills, and eventually we got to up here, which is the top of the canyon. We then lowered ourselves down on a rope through the canyon, and the guides have taken us to this place, which they say is, well, it was obviously a cave. In the cave we've found probably 8 or 10 human skulls and lots of other interesting bones. We're just waiting for the dentist to come and hopefully identify some of them. And we're just going to have a look around for the moment.
Nice skull. One portion of a molar present, everything else missing. Good paperweight. A couple of roots there.
We managed to find some information out today about some caves which were meant to have human remains and possibly some artefacts, cloth. We came by car for about half an hour and then we walked for about another hour. We walked up this great big incline and we came up to the top of the site, which is a huge site up above us, about 10 metres. And from there we climbed down to these caves which smelt to high heaven because they're absolutely full of bats. And we crawled our way in because it's really quite narrow and found a whole sea of remains, skulls, thigh bones, jaw bones, you know, just absolutely countless numbers of remains. And we've come out from that cave out to the other side and we're now sat on a cliff looking out over this amazing view of the valley, which is one of the most phenomenal that I've seen so far in Bolivia. And we're about to climb back up and check out the rest of the site. But the back caves were pretty gnarly.
The main purpose of the expedition was a geological survey carried out at the behest of Sergio Tecmin, the Bolivian Geological Institute. Their senior geologist, Oscar Almendras, was with us throughout, scudding around, digging up fossils day and night. And often helping him was Sergeant Santos Quispe of the Bolivian Army's Cartographic Department. Also there was Mauricio Ordonez from the Ministry of Tourism, and he was a very good geologist as well. They made many exciting finds, including tribalites in black shale, and that indicated that these tribalites were 10 to 15 million years older than had been previously believed. Now, the presence of black shale indicates oil, and that's pretty important for Bolivia. There were other exciting finds in the river, including this enormous surubi, which is a type of catfish. It weighed over 50 pounds and grunted like a pig. The fish, indeed, were a very welcome addition to our diet. Back on the river, there were always a few unexpected difficulties, and occasionally there was the odd thrill and spill. Fortunately, nobody was hurt in this, and we were able to recover the boat and the people, although we did lose 1 or 2 items of equipment. We're not in the recce canoe. Malcolm Cavan was a dab hand at the fried eggs, and we lived pretty well. Much of the food was obtained locally, and we made the best we could. Occasionally there were even fish from the river. But when we made these stops, we set up satellite telephone links with school children in Britain. They'd been following us on our website, and now they could ask questions directly to the various experts with us.
From our point of view, we've found a snake and a spider, which we haven't been able to identify, but the snake itself was sort of bright yellow swimming through the river, and we managed to get out and get a look at that.
The gorge itself is approximately 6 kilometers in length.
Bueno, el cañón aproximadamente tiene 6 kilómetros de largo.
The major problem, as far as we can identify from air recce, which is all we've done so far, is a boulder scatter for about 600 meters where a quebrada or stream comes in, which is here on the air photograph and here on the map. I think you've all seen the other air photographs, but there you see pictures of it. They tend to be repetitive because we flew around in circles several times when we did the first recce, but that is a close-up, so you can get an idea that there are some very big boulders. I mean, I don't know, difficult to say, but probably the size of a small house. So there are some large rocks there which we've got to get round.
Follow each other, you just have to pick your way at the moment between the rocks over. Stop. John, what we did was come in from the right and then sharply across over.
Major boulder scatter in the centre of the Devil's Gorge, and it looks so we're going to have to portage around this because obviously there's no way through these giant rocks behind us, which are not even wide enough for the gaps are not even wide enough for the canoe to get through.
Go 3 left. Swing the nose. Can't see now, can you call me? Okay, we're ready to lift. Oh God, lift. Hands on.
Well, we've come through the Devil's Gorge and it's certainly lived up to its reputation. We had some tricky times in there, particularly with the huge boulder scatters where whole boulders the size of houses had blocked the way through. But we managed to portage round and we got through without incident. We had a little flip shortly after we left, which shows you can never be too careful on this river. And then we came to the Miskay River where we are now. One lady whose teeth we had taken out was so grateful that she took us to a cave. Now this cave up in the mountains above her house contained the most incredible Inca art. And she said that nobody had been there before. And this was indeed quite a major discovery, and we just hope that it can be preserved for the future. Once the word spread that we had doctors and dentists with us who would give treatment free of charge, people came from far and wide. Occasionally we were lucky a favourable wind blew from behind us, and then we could launch a homemade sail and rig it up on the bow, and that helped to push us along by an extra kilometre an hour. And we even saw a local boat. This was the first that we'd seen on the river. On we went into the gorges. Again, the river closed in, but generally speaking, flowed fairly peacefully along. But round the corner, there were always rapids to contend with, and word would come from the canoe by radio, warning us of the troubles ahead. There were even insects. A lot of them were rather nasty biting ones, and we were thankful for Mygex, the insect repellent that we carried.
The bag is flooded and we've lost.
But we also suffered casualties to our stores when waves came over the bows, and on one occasion a waterproof container with our batteries and our shotgun and 2.2 ammunition became wet. This was an awful job drying this lot out.
Now we'll come quickly to do this.
Anyone who's got a spare pair of hands over here?
And then we discovered some fish nets, local industry, and what's more, food. Though we were very grateful for this and quickly bought some food from the locals.
Well, yesterday Jules came up to me after his day's work and told me that he had a little splinter. So I had a look at it, and I don't think I quite realised the extent of the size of the thorn in his finger. So we got Jeremy to have a look at it, and it was then that Jeremy realised what a serious situation this could be. We think it's actually possibly going through a tendon in his finger. He's not handling pain very well. We tried getting it out last night with needles and anaesthetic, and we had to stop. It was too much for him. So hopefully today we can get it done.
At the moment we are on a large, gentle bend in the river, and the scenery's changing. It's almost becoming what I perceived it to be in terms of jungle. It's not entirely there, but we've been enveloped this morning in a deep mist, which the sun is trying to burn through. Everyone this morning's woken up to damp clothing, wet tents, and in many instances wet sleeping bags, caused by being in touch with your fly sheet, etc. So we've had a good breakfast, the daylight's poking through, we're getting ready now to hit the river and get off downstream. We've got a 20-kilometre run today, if things go as well as planned, and I think basically now what people are trying to do is move forward and get as far down towards Muscuria as possible, as quickly as possible, whilst taking in the appropriate paleontological and geological studies, but Muscuria seems to be one of the main focuses. So that's where we're off to.
We got to the point where the track from a small village called Alto Seco reaches the Rio Grande. We were shown a most amazing Inca, presumably, site on terraces. And this was above the river. It was obviously a large settlement. There were burial urns, there were certainly terraces where they'd had fields, and there were signs of buildings. We made a sketch of this, and also, of course, surveyed it. We didn't do any excavation because that'll come later. But this was one of the largest sites that we'd seen so far, and indicates that people were actually living very close to the river in ancient times.
At this point, the river was running deeper, and therefore we could use the mariner outboards that were rigged on transoms inside the boat. We tested them out, and although we would have to lift them occasionally in shallows, we were able to use them in the latter stages of the expedition almost all the time. These are most reliable engines. We've used them all over the world, and indeed they prove themselves on every continent and indeed in every sort of climate.
Do you remember on the first couple of weeks, Charlie? John and Ben had set off in a direction I used to go.
We found them particularly good because they're so simple to handle. On down the river, we came to a lone house with this little lady who Yolima talked to. And she told us of a hot spring nearby where there was almost boiling water. But Charlie Fraser, one of our cameramen, had no hesitation, and he needed a bath anyway, and in he went while we filmed him for a change. The smell of the sulphur was pretty awful, but it was better than Charlie. And so on down into the Patino Gorge and canyons. Now these were spectacular. There were amazing shapes in the rocks and towering cliffs where different coloured sandstone created almost a picture gallery. Also, for the first time, we began to get some rain. Throughout the expedition, we were constantly in contact with each other using the Motorola radios that had been provided for us, and these proved enormously reliable.
Welcome, this is John. We've just passed the 3.9 point. Anything else over?
The Patino Canyon was to be the last of the big canyons through which we were to pass, and we knew now that the end was not far away. Sometimes we would use one of the boats with an engine to tow the others to save fuel. Meanwhile, back up at Rio Grande, Simon's team were hard at work building a computer room for the local school. And they'd also been asked to help in the hospital, where we've been doing a number of operations and also some decorative work.
Well, we've been asked by the hospital here in Rio Grande to paint the walls in the children's unit here. First of all, we thought they wanted us to actually paint the whole of the walls, you know, just colour, and we thought, yeah, that's fine. And then when we came back and discussed it with them, they actually wanted us to paint pictures. So we've been out, we've got lots of tins of paints, lots of nice little brushes. Unfortunately, none of us who've actually been working here are artists, but we've been doing our best. We've done lots of alphabets and flowers, trees, animals, Mickey Mouse, all sorts of things. And everyone who's been part, all the nurses and the children around here, say that they like it. So hopefully, you know, they'll enjoy it.
Just off to go and see a vase picked up by a local man on the site we were at yesterday. The site's called Tetilla, very interesting, huge, agricultural Inca. But we hear from his son that this chap picked up a small, what we believe is a yellow vase, completely intact, jug perhaps. We're going to go and see it now, fingers crossed. Ahí tiene. But we haven't seen it. And this, we've got rib like that, haven't we? We've definitely got some of the shell and the base. And I've seen some of this as well. We were trying to work out how that came out, why it came out. ¿Este para beber qué? ¿Qué tipo de...?
Para beber agua, ¿para qué?
O para, es como para luz también, quizá.
O podría ser para ofrenda, tal vez.
Ofrenda, como
claro.
aquí. Also behind us, to my left, we have Tetilla, the little nipple, so known by the locals. We got here yesterday afternoon. It seems to be a large agricultural Inca site, and we're going to spend most of the day on it, looking around, going to the back, terracing going down to our left and to the front. Lots to see. Fingers crossed we find something interesting.
That was me just being a little bit too lazy, climbing back up to the col. I thought I'll come down around the bottom here. And just, I saw these two holes here really, which didn't look quite right. And then you suddenly realise there's an awful lot more lines, tremendous amount of lichen and things covering it, so we've cleaned it up a bit, and it really is quite exciting because there's obviously something here which is not natural at all.
So well laden with geological specimens collected for Sergio Tecmin, the Bolivian Geological Institute, we headed for the end. There the band of the Battalion Mazana waited to greet us, and many friends and some cerveza.
Now this is the end of the journey. The voyage has taken us from El Hajial, about 420 something kilometers from here. We're still working out the exact distance. Through over 400 rapids of varying sizes, a great amount of scientific work, which is really important for Bolivia, and also, of course, a huge amount of community aid for the people. The water supply at Valle Grande has been reconnected thanks to Just a Drop, who put up the money, and also we've been able to take out a huge number of teeth thanks to the various dentists, and give medical aid, help with the schools, with computers and so on. So it's been a tremendous team effort getting here, and it's not been easy. I must admit the problems of going through the shallows were pretty taxing. Even on the last run of the last kilometre, we had to pull the boats through ankle-deep water. But it's been a very good team, Bolivians and British, and of course many other nationalities who've taken part. And it's by having a good team that the success of Kota Mama 5 has been achieved.
Campaign minute. One more.
And the way the villages are run have been interesting to see. We've had some negative responses, we've had very positive responses, and we've even come across a village which has been run by women.
I had a great time. I'd definitely do it again. I'd recommend anyone else to get onto the SES website, see what's available, and go and do it themselves. They would really enjoy it.